Sewing pattern in today's tutorial can be found at So Fierce Sewing Patterns on Shopify. This is the So Fierce full body sewing tutorial. We're going to start with section A, print out your pattern, and start cutting out the head and the chin first. We're going to trace out our head, pin it to our fabric, and trace it out with some charcoal. Cut out both pieces and start sewing the head to the chin. I prefer hand sewing this part for all the smaller pieces of the doll. It's a little easier than using the machine. When you're hand sewing, you want to make sure that your stitches are very close together and small, and I prefer to use a back stitch for this. So here I'm demonstrating the back stitch. Just make your first stitch, make your second stitch like you would a regular, and then stab your needle kind of in the middle of those two. That way you have as little gaps as possible. Now we're going to whip stitch this head shut. Make sure not to grab the very end of the fabric. You want to kind of fold it over both sides and then whip stitch that closed so that none of the frayed ends of the fabric are sticking out. And now the way I make a knot at the end of the fabric is I wrap the thread around my needle 3 times. I pull that through really tightly, and that makes a knot at the very end. And then I'm gonna stab the needle through the head and then cut the thread like that so it hides the thread inside of the doll. We made a head! Woohoo! Now I'm going to quickly show you how I paint the face of the doll. I like to sew the nose on first, and then I like to mark out the eyes and lips and the eyebrows with a light brown color. And then I go in with the black, kind of carving everything out. And then at the very end was when I add the whites to the eyes. We painted a face, yay! And make a hole on the chin because that's where you're going to sew the neck onto. So for the neck here, the original pattern that I drafted up was a little too short, or the original pattern for the neck, the original pattern that I drafted up was way too skinny. Yeah, that old version does not look good. But that'll be fixed by the time this is uploaded to YouTube. Now we're going to take our posable wire that's going to be the spine of the doll, and we're going to fold over the wire, and we're going to hot glue the ends of the wire and wrap some scrap fabric around those ends. So this is going to prevent the wire from ripping through the doll. Now we're going to insert that into the head, and now we're going to sew that on with a whip stitch. Now we're going to do a basic stitch around the edges of the circle. Put some stuffing in the center and pull that thread tight. And now we're going to just do some straight stitches all across the extra fabric to secure the stuffing inside the boob. And then we're going to do that knot that I did before. Cut off the extra thread. And I use a blanket stitch to secure the boobs to the torso. I already filmed a tutorial for how I stuff the arms and the legs, so I'll briefly go over it here. Leave openings on the top of the legs, the ankles, and the wrists. I use jewelry pliers and a chopstick to help me flip the limbs inside out. And add wires to the limbs. When stuffing the legs, use small sections of polyfill and take extra care to ensure the feet are firm before stuffing the rest of the leg. When sewing on the legs, sew at a 45-degree angle, starting from the inner leg. Sewing on the arms is pretty straightforward. You just take a chunk of the inner arm and a chunk of where the shoulder is and pull through your thread, and do that about 2 times. Tie off and make a knot. We're going to just speed through me sewing on the other arm. And with that, you've officially made your own So Fierce doll. Whoa! Yay! I just wanted to say at the very end, don't be discouraged if you have to seam rip and resew pieces. While making this tigress doll, I had to resew her nose, I had to redo her ears, because when you're sewing at such a small scale, even just a slight millimeter off can make the doll look a little wonky. So please don't be discouraged, don't give up. Thankfully with So Fierce, it's as simple as getting a seam ripper and resewing things back on. I think that's everything I have to say. Thank you so much for if you've purchased a So Fierce sewing pattern, or even if you're just watching on YouTube and are curious to see my sewing process. I appreciate everyone's love and support. I appreciate all the people that have been encouraging me to continue working on this pattern. And thank you so much. Thank you for supporting an independent artist that's So Fierce.